Participants, kindly mute yourself. Participants, Ashok sir.
म्यूट कर रहे सर.
Ashok sir, mute करिए. Ashok Tabildar sir. Okay. Sir, I think we should start now. Participants, very good evening to all of you. Again, today we have a very esteemed speaker in the galaxy of the HRDC MU, Professor S.K. Singh sir. As far as a brief introduction of Professor S.K. Singh sir is concerned, Professor S.K. Singh sir was the professor in Department of Physics, MU Aligarh, and he joined department at a very young age. After that, he has the experienced researcher in physics with very good publications and also guided good PhDs, thesis, visited abroad many times and attended various international and national seminars and conferences. Participant, one of the important aspects of Professor S.K. Singh Sahab is that he was the Vice Chancellor of HNB Garhwal University. I will say that he was a very successful Vice Chancellor of this Hemati Nandan Baguda Garhwal University because of many reasons. I will just tell you, just for your our inspiration, what he did a lot in that university, and I will say the innovation during his tenure of Vice Chancellorship. The state university, that is HNB Garhwal University, got a status of Center University, one of the Center University of India. He changed, and I will say a kind of radical change in the university, and that is the evaluation system, examination system, and teaching learning system, and of course, infrastructural development of HNB Garhwal University. He was a member of Search Committee of Vice Chancellor appointed by the University Grant Commission, UGC, India. He was also the member of ICSSR, UGC, and other academic bodies of India. He is the versatile researcher person of HRDC, not only Aligarh Muslim University, AMU, but he is the resource person of different HRDC, that is popularly known as in different universities of India. Even after his retirement, he is very active, and I will say that shares his knowledge, which is very motivating and informative for us like young fellows and young assistant professor and faculty members of different universities and colleges. With this short introduction, Professor S.K. Singh Sahab, I would like to invite sir to discuss on the topic that is interconnectivity of teaching and research. Sir, now the mic over to you, sir, to speak on the topic, which has been interconnectivity of teaching and research. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Aftab Ahmad Sahab. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Dear participants, I will be talking about the interconnectivity of teaching and research. It is very general topic, and I can see in your on my screen that almost everybody I can see seems to have a doctorate degree. So obviously you have been involved in research in your student life, and probably you are also involved in guiding research in your present occupation, wherever you are working in the universities or in the colleges. You must have some experience of guiding research for some years at the PhD level, and also at the project level, at postgraduate and maybe some undergraduate classes also. So the subject is not new, but I think there are many new things which have come up recently, and you should also probably be familiar. What is the history of interconnectivity between teaching and research? These days, you know that research is taken for granted as a mandatory component of a career for getting a job, especially in the universities, but also it is so in the colleges. All the public service commissions who recruit the professors, assistant professors for universities or in the colleges. In their recruitment procedure, uh, interview is an integral part. And interview, you are always asked about the questions about your research, your publications, the quality of publications, number of publications, and the recognition in research. So these days it is taken for granted that research is an integral part of the teaching. Now there are questions uh, whether research makes a teaching better or research makes a teaching doesn't affect the teaching or it affects negatively. What is the relation between teaching and research? How it has evolved over the years as our education system, higher education system has evolved uh, from the beginning to the present days. So I will uh, base my presentation in two parts. First, um, I will give a historical introduction to the interconnectivity of teaching and research in context of the higher education institutions in India and abroad. And then I will give my own opinion about this interconnectivity, how much is based on our perception, how much is based upon hardcore research, hardcore pedagogical research done. Not much research has been done, but whatever research has been done, what are the facts coming out of that? Uh, I think my presentation will be little biased because I have been in this academic career for more than 50 years and actively involved in research as well as in teaching. Teaching both undergraduate classes and postgraduate classes and the research classes, teaching in state universities, teaching in central universities, teaching in foreign universities, and conducting research. So obviously, my point of view will be a little biased, um, being active in both. Uh, but I think even with this state of mind, whatever I am going to say will be beneficial to you. And as I said, the subject is very general. Almost all of you must have an opinion about this because you are already practicing teaching and research both. You have your own experiences. You have your own experiences based on your uh, career as well as based on your association with your mentors, with your guide, uh, in whatever the universities they are, and probably based on your collaboration also. So this is a sort of something which you, in a sort of bread and butter of all the academic personnel working either in the postgraduate colleges or in the university system, and you must have an opinion about it. I will like to say that the subject is so obvious that sometimes we feel that what research can be done in this field. Uh, but I will try to show you that there some research has been done. More research is needed to be done for the benefit of the funding agencies, for the benefit of the government, and for benefit of the higher educational institutions while they are hiring the faculty in their institutions for teaching in undergraduate, postgraduate classes are the research institutions. In fact, the perspective has changed completely in last 20, 25 years, especially in India, after the growth of the private institutions, private universities, uh, enormous growth as compared to the government institutions. And their hiring practices have been quite different than government institutions. If some of you are working in the private university, probably you would know working conditions are different. Um, the basic assumptions are different for hiring. The working conditions, as I said, are different. Uh, the academic, financial, and infrastructures may be comparable, probably better in private institutions, but still their priorities are different. So, I mean, there are a lot of dimensions have been added to this profession, especially um, in the sector of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine streams. Um, because the aims and objectives of opening private universities in these areas as well, and the areas like in humanities and social sciences are completely different, and so are the uh, criteria for hiring. So I said in the beginning that uh, these days research is supposed to be an integral part of teaching, but it was not always so. For obvious reasons, as far as our country is concerned, as I will say in a few moments. But let me tell you, historically, this was not so even in the advanced countries. Even in the advanced countries, by that I mean advanced countries from the um, standards of today. But maybe 500 years ago or 300, 400 years ago, uh, the Western countries were not so advanced as India or China or Japan. So even those days, higher education system in Europe or in Middle East uh, was probably not as good as in our own country. Of course, I don't have much information about the higher education system in olden days in China and Japan, or for that example, in Greece, because they are the older civilizations, and they were leaders in the higher education and the education sector. Um, Western countries are really the latecomers in the higher education system. Their universities were established later than the universities in Arab countries or in China or in Japan or in India. Uh, but one thing was common that like Indian universities, in Western universities, also there was no component of research when the higher education system was started. You see, higher education system in our own country, probably started with what we call Gurukul and system in the Vedic period, and then we had the Bihar system in Bauddhic period, and then we had Islamic institutions, Madrasa system in the times of Islamic, after Islamic invasion, before the Britishers came. Uh, you might have heard of many things which were done by ancient Indian scientists, so-called scientists or teachers or rishis, like the discovery of zero and discovery of many other things. Uh, but main emphasis was learning the life skills, how you become a good person, how you become a good individual, how you become successful in your life, not for earning, not for employment, but as being a human being. So the aim of the education was sort of becoming a better person and learning the skills of life, how to survive. In fact, more or less, that was also uh, the aims and objectives of the higher education system in Middle East and in Western countries, especially in Europe. Probably you know that the era we are talking about, there was nothing in the United States. Only Western countries, mean the European countries, especially Italy, Spain, and Germany, and England. So there, the universities were there again. Their main emphasis was, as I said, learning life skills and morally religious education, because the Christianity was the leading light of the day. How to be a good Christian, how to be a good person, how human being. That was the aims and objectives of the education those days. Like in our country, Gurukuls and in rishis, there you just become uh, a good person. As the times went by, the universities went through reforms and two schools of thought were developed. One school of thought was led by Newman in England. He wrote a book, I think in 1800 something. It's called The Idea of the University. And there he advocated that at that time his concept was very supposed to be very modern, because he said that our higher education system should move away from religious education and should go to uh, include humanities and social sciences and philosophies in addition to the religious studies. This was something which Indian universities or Indian higher education system was already doing. You know, I mean, religion, philosophy, grammar, astronomy, these things were already taught in our ancient universities. And these subjects have some component of research, which was completely missing in the Western universities. There was another school of thought led by Humboldt in Germany around the same time, and that he was an explorer in a science sense, or what we can call in our today's language a scientist. And he said that the aim of the university should be to create knowledge, not only to understand what is existing, but is to understand the present knowledge. You know, the following, the Western concept of higher education was based on the Greek and Latin uh, view of the wisdom. Plato, Aristotle, those type of philosophies. Again, um, in the same manner as Indian, they were thinkers, they were philosophers. Uh, but Humboldt said, since he was a lover of nature and he used to watch nature, and then he said that the universities must include a component of research, because they should not concentrate only on learning what is existing, but they should also concentrate on creating knowledge. So that was sort of a new concept in higher education, which was also adopted by the followers of Newman in England. Newman was working in England. Again, he was a priest. So, being even priest, he advocated that universities and higher education institutions should go beyond religious studies. And obviously, in that sense, he was a rebel, because he expanded the university education from their religious studies, religious jurisprudence, really the law, but really the, the laws within the concept of religion. So these two schools of thought really merged after the success of German model, because very soon German institutions dominated the arena of higher education, because they were the ones who were creating things, they were the ones who were discovering things, they were the one who was where the Europe was the place where industrialization took place, which sort of gave them a bigger start in dominating the world and dominating the world economy. So the British thinkers also saw the importance of doing research. So these two way of thinking about the higher education, about the university merged, and a model of the university where you have research as a very important component, not a mandatory component still, but a very important component of the higher education system merged in the Western world. As far as our country is concerned, we were in fact going through more dramatic changes, because we had, as I said in the beginning, our Gurukul system that was sort of completely changed when Buddhists came, and you know the most of the famous universities in India were started in the Buddhist period. I will not go into that because that is not the subject of the talk today. So there the concept was again religious, philosophy, and also research, because these universities of Takshila at that time uh, attracted many scholars from outside, many scholars from other countries, many scholars from Arab, China, and countries like that who came uh, and stayed at Takshila and later at Nalanda and Vikramshila, other universities, and did work in philosophy and astronomy in addition to what our scientists also did. So there was some component of research there. But after Arab invasion, Islamic system was imposed on our country, and there was a time, spanning hundreds of years, when we had our own system, not the Gurukul system, but a reformed system in the colleges, and as well as the Islamic system. All these things were changed when the East India Company came. Later, it was taken over by the British Raj, so to say. But their main aim was to create a group of people who can help them in running the East India Company or running the British Raj later on. So they needed a buffer of educated Indians who can work as a go-between Britishers, between East India Company officials and the Indian people. So if you read the reforms in higher education brought in by Macaulay and other contemporaries, see the main aim of higher education and the universities, in 1850s, four universities at Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, and Delhi, they were open, but there was no research component there, because that was not the aim of the East India Company people. They wanted to create a group of people, what we all know now, they are called Babus. They wanted to create Babus who can work for the East India Company on their behalf and go to reach the Indian people and help sustain the hold of the East India Company. I think I have talked about this in many other lectures, and maybe I have, unfortunately, I will get in some detail about what Macaulay and others did at that time, what were their aims and objectives, why the colleges were open, what was taught in those days. But there was no research component. This is surprising because the universities which are open were based on the model of Oxford and Cambridge, which were completely different in nature as compared to what East India Company and later British Raj people uh, started in India, colleges and the universities. They're completely different. And it's clear why they are different. They are different because their aims and objectives were different. Another aspect was it was different between the British universities and the Indian universities opened by the British. That there was no emphasis on science or engineering or technology. In fact, I think Britishers in those period or East India Company in those period opened so many colleges all over India. But there were only two engineering colleges which were worth mentioning. One was College of Engineering in Shivpur near Calcutta and the other was in Roorkee. So you see, And they were also opened because of very, very specific purpose. It's very interesting history. You should read why they were opened and how they achieved their objective. So first, there was no emphasis on research. There was no emphasis on science, engineering, and technology. They were only teaching sociology, humanities, so that they can create people who can speak English, can interact with the Indian people who were not so educated, and help the East India Company sustain their hold over the Indian society. So research has never integral part of the teaching in Indian. And that system unfortunately continued for many hundreds of years. Obviously, as World War One demonstrated, later World War Two demonstrated that in order to be economically strong, in order to be economically self-sufficient, one has to be very strong in science and technology. One has to innovate, one has to create, one has to discover things. Otherwise, you will not be able to sustain your own economy or sustain your own country. So the importance of research was really realized after the demonstration in the two world wars, how the Europe or later United States dominated the whole scenario of uh, economic development in every area of activity. And therefore, it was realized in India also that research is an integral part of teaching, and it should be included in the establishment of higher education institutions. This was, of course, a guiding principle. And after independence, there were many institutions were opened, but aims and objectives were different. See, there was no research component. Well, I said there is no research component, which means there was a minimal research component. Because you see, research is an intellectual activity. And if you have 200 people working in the university or in a college, you will always find 10% of the people will be very active, will be doing research, no matter what, whether they are being supported or not, because it is intellectual activity. And be human mind being very creative, at least 10% of them will be doing research on their own. And that is how the research was sustained in Indian universities before independence and mostly after independence, except some of those who are fortunate enough to go to England or US or Germany for their education. So they were exposed to the research methodologies, research, and they did very excellent work. We all know the examples of that. But even in our own country, where there were not research facilities, still research was there, but it was very minimal. What I'm saying by saying that there was no research means that there was no institutional support for the research. There was no institutional support financially or infrastructure-wise or otherwise coming from the university or college establishment to innovate or to do research. But need was felt at the time of independence. And initially, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research and Agricultural Council or Indian Council of Medical Research, they were all established around the time of the independence. In fact, historically before the independence, but around that time. So the need for that was felt. You all know that many institutions were opened after the independence, but again, research was not an integral part for a different reason. As I said, why research was not integral part in the time of the higher institutions which were opened by British or by East India Company before that, aims and objectives were different. more or less same policy was followed unwillingly even after independence for completely different reasons. What were the reason? Their reason was economic. Because the literacy rate, level of education was very low at the time of independence. So the priority of the government was uh, to make higher education or in fact education in some sense reach every section of the society. You know, our society was not uniform, a lot of differences. There were people who were very poor, there are people who are very, very rich, there are people who are not educated at all, the literacy rate was very low. So the first aim of the government at the time was to make education inclusive, to start institutions where by which education can be brought to each and every section of the society, about the poor people, about the tribal people, about the rural people, about the hill people. So their aim was not to excel in research, but to make sure that education or higher education is brought to each and every door of the Indian citizen. It was a huge task. So even though our first Prime Minister was supposed to be very scientifically minded, he has a great scientific culture, he did believe in science and developing scientific temper. Resources were not strong enough or big enough to go into the research. And the priority was to make education inclusive, reach to each and every person. That is why in the first 5-year plan, second 5-year plan, more emphasis was given financially, administratively, academically to primary education and secondary education rather than the higher education. Not to say that university was not open, but I said that was not the priority area. Even the universities were open, then the research was not a priority area. Because at that time, the question was of survival. The question was giving a decent life to people and decent education, make them literate. So because of that, higher educations were one-sided. I think you are all young, but we went to school in 50s, and in 1950s, many schools were open, and many schools were opened by people who spend their own money to open schools, not aiming to learn to earn any money from that, as opposed to these days, because these days private institutions are being opened only to make more money. But it was not so in 1950s. 1950s, I know personally many people who opened colleges, primary colleges, secondary institutions by using their own resources. They're using their own land. There were a lot of teachers working in those colleges without salaries for many, many years, just for the sake of educating people, educating the children from neighborhood and that people. So that was a sort of different attitude, making possible for everybody to go to school or to go to college or to go to university. But again, there were not many schools which were opening in science and engineering and technology because they needed a lot of money. Mainly, again, the the emphasis was on humanities and social sciences again, but for a different reason. Because first aims and objectives were to open to make people literate, make people at least they could reach up to graduate. So in research was in that sense not an integral part of But as I said, the government was aware that the need for teaching and research. So these institutions were open. Later on, as I said, Council of Science and Industrial Research, ICAR in agriculture sector, ICMR in medical sector, and in every sector the efforts were made to encourage research. And many institutions for purely research were open. This policy of the government was good as well as bad, both things. Why it was good and bad both? It was good because new institutions for research were open, where you can do only research and try to compete with the other countries and see whether you can create things, whether you can discover things, whether you can innovate things, which will help in industrialization of the country. So a lot of labs under Council of Scientific and Industrial Research were open. I think presently there are more than 50 labs operating under CSIR, later on Department of Science and Technology, later on Department of Biotechnology, then Department of Atomic Energy, ISRO, the space. I think everything open one after the other. In addition to what we already had, All India Council of Technical Education for engineering education, as I said, ICAR for agriculture education. In every area we were there. But these institutions which were opened after independence were purely research purposes. But again, for a big country like India, they were not enough. But at least, because of the thinking of the government at the time, we had our priority to open more institutions so that higher education could be inclusive, could be brought to everybody, and at the same time, sustain the research. So that was a good thing, that many research institutions were open. Not sufficient, but they were open. What was the bad thing? The bad thing was that whatever research was being done in the universities, that sort of was almost reduced to zero. Because in these research institutions, people who were doing research full time. Government was giving more money to them, recruiting scientists. So they had no other work other than research. So many people who were working in the universities and were very active in research moved from the universities to these institutions for better working conditions, for better salary, and for better infrastructure facilities, so that they can excel in research. So far and so good for them and for research. But it was very bad for the universities, because whatever research was being done in the university, that become minimal. So, come back to our question. We had the university where they were teaching, everybody was teaching, but almost there was no research. And on the other hand, there were research institutions where everybody was doing research, but there was no teaching. So there's no question of interconnectivity in that sense, because the true group of higher education institutions, one was concentrating only on teaching, minimal research. One was concentrating only on research with no teaching, not even minimal, no teaching. So in 50s and 60s, there were higher educational institutions in India with a character that there is no interconnectivity between teaching and research, almost minimal. Of course, some people, as I said, who were interested in teaching but were active in research, stayed in the universities. So maybe 5 to 10% people were active in research. As I said, in the light of independence or need to take higher education to everybody in every corner of India, many colleges were opened, postgraduate colleges, good undergraduate colleges, but they concentrated mainly on teaching. There was no research there. So some of you who are older enough might realize probably it was too you're too young to realize that uh, government started many schemes to encourage research in colleges. That college teachers were encouraged to research. Lot of incentives given for PhDs, for doing PhD. Lot of incentives given were given to the teachers in the form of granting them leave, granting them stipend, granting them money, so that they can go for 3-4 years in the university and do research and come back and start teaching in the colleges again. Many programs were started. Of course, it has some impact, but these schemes were not very successful. Because research is a full-time job. When you are teaching in a college, you have a family, you have children. You just cannot take off 3-4 years and go to other university, work there and do research. So the things did not work out that way. So as I said, many colleges were started, many state universities were started, but there was no research output. So that was the situation in independent India. That the research was there, but there was not strong component of research in the universities. Research was mainly done in research institutions where there was no teaching, so there was no interconnectivity. Of course, there were certain exceptions like IITs or central universities where uh, there was enough infrastructure, not enough, I should say. There was some infrastructure, and they were qualified people who were doing research as well as teaching. So there was some research and teaching done in these universities. Some excellent state universities were there, like Calcutta University, Jadavpur University, Bombay University, or Allahabad University, or some universities in South, Andhra universities, where the teaching was done uh, as well as research was done. But again, I said there was improvement. So that's sort of the historical perspective of the relation between teaching and research in Indian higher educational institutions. Uh, but let's come back to philosophical question whether what is the relation between teaching and research? Is it positive? First, is there any relation between research and teaching? If there is a relation in the sense of mathematics, sense of statistics, sense, not relation, but as you said, correlation. If there is a correlation between research and teaching, if there is any correlation, is it positive or it is negative or it is zero? In fact, doesn't really, there is no correlation between research and teaching. Or to express in a common language, are good researchers good teachers? Are good teachers good researchers? Good researchers are bad teachers? Or doesn't make any difference whether you are doing research or not, doesn't affect your teaching. So, as I said, correlation is positive, negative, or zero. This is a matter of research, as a matter of perception. As I said, I am biased because I do research as well as teaching. I strongly feel that the relation between research and teaching is positive. A good researcher makes a good teacher. Therefore, one should insist on research credentials also while recruiting. But as I said, this is my personal opinion. This has to be supported by hardcore research, hardcore data, hardcore sample surveys, using various statistical methods, the way one arrives a correlation between two quantities. Has this research been done? Yes, this has been done, but not much research has been done in India. There is some research has been done in United States or United Kingdom or Australia or New Zealand or Denmark or Sweden, for different reasons. I will come to that. But at least let me explain the bias with which I have lived with last more than 50 years. That why I feel that the relation between research and teaching should be positive. I said should be. I'm not saying is positive. Should be positive. Because the research and teaching both are intellectual activities of highest kind. They both involve original thinking and they are involved with understanding knowledge, propagating knowledge, as well as creating knowledge. The three areas of human activity or human mind are involved both in teaching and research. Of course, the relative importance is different in both academic activities. For example, in research, the component of creating knowledge is more than disseminating knowledge, while in teaching, the component of disseminating knowledge is more than the creating knowledge. Understanding knowledge is probably both same in both activities. So all three activities of human mind reach their pinnacle, reach their height in teaching and research. So therefore they should be related. And they should be positively related. So to give you an example, for example, if you are doing research, then you know what are the things which will lead to, in your own field, for example, in your own field, whether you are doing humanities or social sciences or physics or chemistry or engineering, you know what are the topics which are of utmost importance in creating new things which will make life better for people everywhere, but especially in your society, in your community where you live, or in your field of interest related to your community or society. So if you're doing research, you know that from a vast sea of topics, what are the topics which would be important for making life better in your limited field, but at least you will be able to pinpoint the subjects which are important. So with this knowledge, you can do a better job in designing the syllabus for undergraduate or postgraduate courses and teaching them. While teaching, you can also design ways in which the important concepts can be brought out and more time could be spent on them. While teaching, you know there are many concepts which are taught for the first time in undergraduate or postgraduate level. And you need to invent different techniques to teach to a diverse group of students of say 100 students in undergraduate, a typical 100 undergraduate class, or 30 to 40 of a typical postgraduate class. It is not a uniform group of students. Like it's not all bright students or not dull students. I think their brightness probably differs from maybe 20% level to 80%, 90% level. Some are very bright, some are not so bright, some are average. So you have to develop techniques how to take the whole class along in your teaching. You know, you cannot develop techniques which are good for explaining things to bright students and not to the dull students of class, because then they will lose interest in attending the class. Or if you spend too much time in explaining the simple concepts, then the bright students will get bored. They will not get along with you in the whole class. So teach a diverse group of students like this. Your research experience is important. Because in your research, by training, you are taught or you learn how to improvise things, how to tackle things which are unexpected. Because in the research, you don't know what you are going to discover. Even though these days you write a project, funding is there based upon each and everything you have to write in detail. How will you do it? In what time you will do it? What money is involved? What sort of assistants are involved? Technical assistant, other. Everything has to be spelled out. But even then, you discover new things. You discover things which are not expected. So there, by training in research, you are trained to face new challenges. Not only face new challenges, but discover ways to handle it. You face new problems in research, then you are trained to find ways to solve them. You are trained to find ways to innovate things. And that is very helpful in teaching a group of diverse students. That is one thing. And if somebody is not involved in research, by that I mean really active research, not the research for the sake of publication, then he follows the progress of the subject. And for teacher, it is very important. Because if teacher is teaching the same thing for years and years, that is the sort of model of our teaching in undergraduate and even in postgraduate classes. Because here teachers prefer to teach same thing, same courses every year, because that is the easier way to do it. Of course, some institutions like IITs change the subject of the teacher concerned every 2 years. They are given different subjects. But you know, in our country, we have something called experts. So normally experts don't change their subjects. They teach same things all over and over and over every year. So as they grow older, they stop growing academically, and they don't keep up with the subject. In fact, there are a lot of schemes started by the government, what we call continuing education. But we all know how useful they are, how seriously they are taken by the teachers, because most of the teachers are happy doing what they are doing, especially the later stages of their career. Most of us are not willing to learn new things. Most of us are not willing to work hard. They are happy to do what they have been doing for years. In fact, there is a joke saying that most of our professors don't grow beyond what their professors had taught them, because they are very happy doing what they have been doing for years. They don't diverse in other subjects. With so much talk about the interdisciplinary subjects, even there are not many people, not more than even 5% in the universities who undertake work in this interdisciplinary subjects. So you see, so for teachers it is very important that they keep up with the modern development, the latest development in their field. That is possible only when you are active in research, because there you know in your own subject how the subject is evolving every 5 years or every 6 years. There's so much emphasis done on revising the syllabus, on modernizing the syllabus, updating the syllabus. Why? Because the progress of knowledge is very fast. Things are changing very fast. So the syllabus have to be kept in tune with the development. Obviously, some bright people make the changes in syllabus, but that is not sufficient. I mean, that syllabus has to be taught by thousands of teachers spread all over the country, spread over so many institutions. So as long as they are not modernized, as long as they are not up to date, no, they cannot be this modernizing the syllabus has no meaning, or updating the textbooks has no meaning. In my 50 years, more than 50 years of teaching, I know, especially in the colleges. And now I think I have spent almost 7 to 8 years visiting colleges in the NAC committees for grading and the universities. And in many colleges, I have found that people are teaching from very old textbooks. Very old textbooks. They are not aware of the latest textbooks. Probably you know that many of us, many of teachers in colleges, even the universities, don't even teach from textbooks. They teach from their old notes. Probably the notes which they have taken when they were students. I mean, that is not a joke. That is true. So if that's the way our teachers are behaving. Then obviously no point in modernizing the syllabus or giving orientation courses or giving them reflection courses. But you see, all these things are automatically solved. You don't have to do all this if the teacher is actively involved in research. So these are some of the things which research I feel is makes a good teacher. In fact, a research on this line was proposed in United States and United Kingdom and other, where there is much emphasis on research, much emphasis on funding. Because the idea was proposed by some professors that if liberal funding can be given to the teachers for research, then the teaching standards will go up. For the very reason which I have explained. Therefore, research projects were taken up in the United States and United Kingdom to study the correlation between research and teaching. Of course, there are many commissions were established. I have the list, but I think that's not important. But as I said, mainly aim was to get more fund for research to professors in the university. As I said, the hypothesis was that teaching will improve. You will get research output. You will get new ideas. You will get new discoveries. You will get new innovations. At the same time, teaching standards will go up. So that's why many commissions were, as I said, established in the United States and United Kingdom. I will come in a moment to what was the result of that. Of course, to be the devil's advocate, I will also put a point of view that why research will not make you a good teacher. Just to demonstrate that subject is very difficult for research. I have just told you why the research will make you a good teacher. But I will argue now why research will not make you a good teacher. Well, you see, teaching requires time. Teaching requires time you spend in preparing the lecture. When you go to the classroom, you give homework at undergraduate level as well as the postgraduate level. You collect the homework and then you correct them. You have tutorials, conduct tutorials based on the homework. You have interaction with the students, tell them what is right, what is wrong in their homework, and you have interaction. So you spend more time. Now, if you are very active in research, you don't have time because research is these days project-based. Project is time-based. You get a project for 3 years, 5 years, 4 years. You have to complete the project. In that 3-4 years, you have to buy the equipment. You have to make appointments. You have to do the research. You have to publish the research. And the most difficult part that you have to do the propaganda for your research. It means that you publish your research, you attend conferences and tell others what you have done. You have to talk about your research. This all needs time. If you have 2 projects, if you have 3 projects, you are more active, you have more projects. So where is the time for you to do research, to do teaching? So obviously you do more time in research and you don't have time to do teaching. What you do, you assign teaching to research scholars, to your assistants, you skip classes, you tell students to study from this book, from that book, so on and so forth. So you neglect teaching. So you see, more active your research you are, more successful in research you are, if you are, you tend to neglect teaching, and then the teaching suffers. Unfortunately or fortunately, if you get some awards in research, there are many awards in our own country, international, then you become a celebrity. You go on giving lectures on your subject, on your research in colleges, in the universities, even the popular lecture, even if you have less time. So if you are more active in research, more successful in research, more recognized in research, nationally and internationally, so you neglect your teaching. So that way, the good researchers will not make good teachers because they don't have time to. So both aspects are there. So it is a very difficult topic to do research and study the correlation between teaching and research. But there are more problems than this. What are the problems? To answer the question that what is the correlation between teaching and research, whether good researchers make good teachers or good teachers make good researchers or otherwise or vice versa, we have to determine the parameters. What parameters? First, parameters to determine good teaching. How will you decide that the teacher is very good? What are the parameters which define a good teacher? What are parameters which define a good researchers? In fact, there are well-defined parameters for defining a good researcher. Well, those parameters are well defined, but people are not unanimous about their interpretation. For example, some people will say that if you publish more papers, you are a good researcher. But many people will not agree because we say the number of papers is not important. What is important is quality of paper. Often quoted example is that Einstein had very few papers, but he is one of the most famous, most successful scientists, researcher in the last 2 centuries. So number of papers is not a foolproof criterion to define a good researcher. Now, if we come to quality of research, then who decides the quality? That is a subjective judgment. In fact, probably all of you know that University Grants Commission has a list of journals. If you publish in those journals, they will be recognized as a good publication. There is a list of journals. But we also know that that list has been criticized so heavily, and that list has been curtailed many times in the last 5 years, and is still under review. So obviously, the way one decides the quality of paper is also very controversial. Of course, there are some well-known good journals. If you publish them internationally, supposed to be very good paper. There are well-known bad journals, but the majority of journals are in between, where some people will say the quality is published there, the quality is good. If you don't publish there, quality is not. So the number of papers or the quality of paper, they are parameters well defined, but they are controversial. Again, there are many awards. And if you say that a scientist, a researcher has got this award, he's supposed to be a very good scientist. Like Bhatnagar Award. Bhatnagar was the highest award in our country for science research. So if somebody has got Bhatnagar Award, he's supposed to be a good researcher. I agree with that. But again, there are many very good researchers who have not got Bhatnagar Award, but their quality of research is no less than the people who have got Bhatnagar Award. Because there are many good research workers, but the Bhatnagar Awards are very limited. Obviously, the people who get Bhatnagar Award are good, but there are many others who don't get a Bhatnagar Award are also very good. Similarly, there are many other awards because they are limited in number. So if somebody gets this award, is a good researcher, but doesn't mean that somebody who has not got the award is not a good researcher. Again, we also know that humanities and social sciences, there are many awards done by Sahitya Academy Award and other awards which are very controversial. They are given not on the basis of literary achievement, but there are other criteria. So, a award-winning scientist or award-winning researcher, whether it is science or humanities or arts, does not guarantee the quality is good. So, to summarize, there are many parameters which can determine the quality of research, but they are not foolproof. They are controversial. Situation is worse in teaching. In teaching, there are not even well-defined parameters which define a good teacher or a good teaching. So when the parameters of good teaching are not defined, parameters of good research are defined but controversial, then how do you compare? You don't compare with parameters which are not well defined. Well, you can compare, but outcome will not be really unambiguous. So it is a difficult subject to do quantitative statistical analysis of interconnectivity between research and teaching. To answer the question, is there any correlation between teaching and research? If there is any correlation, it is positive or it is negative or it is zero. So it is a difficult question. Nevertheless, there have been attempts to do this based on sample surveys done, as I said, in many countries. Next 5 to 10 minutes, let me tell you what are the results. You can guess the results. In fact, there is a Bayer Commission in the United States, the Dinning Commission report, various other commissions report in Canada done in last 20 years, who have done this research. In fact, I have tried to search for such research done in India, but I couldn't find. Maybe the people working in education department or some of you who are working in education departments can really search whether such commissions have been established in India. Some research has been done quantitatively in India or not. At least I couldn't find any reference. But that doesn't mean there are no study. There must be some. And all 3 types of results are available based on these commission reports. Some reports say that the correlation is positive. Some say correlation is negative. Some studies say there's no correlation. But as I said, why it is difficult? It is difficult to do research in this field because this question cannot be answered in general, because it will depend upon the discipline. Because the research output or the result output may be different for social sciences and humanities. It may be different for science subjects. The result may be different for undergraduate classes, where the classes have a lot of students. Personal interaction with the student teacher is not frequent. And the results for the postgraduate classes or the research students will be different, because the number is small, there is more interaction. The result will be more realistic. This will also depend, the correlation will depend on the discipline. First on the undergraduate and postgraduate classes, then one on discipline, social sciences and the sciences or engineering. Our extreme example is in medical discipline. In medicine, the interaction between teacher and students is very intense. Or engineering, the interaction with the students and teacher is fairly good, but in social sciences it is not there. So it depends upon what class you are talking about, undergraduate or postgraduate. It depends upon what type of discipline you are talking about. It again depends upon the type of institutions you are talking about. Type of institution means that the character of the management. Some of the management may be very, very liberal in supporting research so that the researchers, professors can do research freely. Some of the management of the institution may be very strict. They will not be willing to give leave for attending conferences. They will not be willing to give money for attending conferences. So their research, even of high quality, will suffer, and that will affect their teaching. So that also depends upon the type of institutions. So a general answer to the question is not easy. So you have to really specify that when you talk about the interconnectivity of teaching and research, you must specify whether you're talking about social sciences, you're talking about humanities, you're talking about engineering, or you're talking about medicine. So it should be specific, subject specific, discipline specific question, number one. Number two, that it should be institution specific. Talking about the undergraduate institutions or postgraduate institutions or research institutions. So it is not possible to answer this question in general. One of the obvious difficulties is getting the sample size. See, what are the most important sample size for doing research in this field? That is, you can talk with the principal or head of departments or vice chancellors about professors, about the teachers or the faculty, that out of your faculty, these many people are doing research and as well as teaching, and what is the impact? Are these researchers good teachers? So they can give you an opinion. Again, that could be a subjective opinion. Or you can talk about with the students. This is the most important sample of students. You talk with the students, take a survey, whether the teachers which are active in research are good teachers or not good teachers. But it's a very difficult thing to do because most of the students don't know about their teachers, other activities. Because teachers come in the class, teach, go away. As I said, in postgraduate classes, there is some interaction. The students interact with the teachers, maybe for 5 minutes or 10 minutes after the class. But in undergraduate classes, almost there is no interaction. I'm not talking about the IITs or ICERs or institutions like that, or medical colleges, or even some engineering colleges. Most of the universities and most of the colleges where majority of the students are working in humanities, and most of the students are studying in humanities, social sciences, there is almost no interaction. Teachers come to the class, takes his classes and goes away. Of course, these days in new education policy, we have a lot of tutorials, we have a lot of homework, we have a lot of projects. I don't know how much successful they are, but at least in undergraduate classes, the interaction is minimal between the teachers and the students. Students just don't know about the teachers, that the teacher who is teaching them is doing any research or not. So how will they answer the question that good researchers are good teachers or not? What is the correlation between them? So that is a major problem in doing statistical studies. Statistical studies are mainly based on sample surveys. So when you take samples, is very difficult. The samples of peers, like principals, vice chancellors, and other teachers, other senior teachers, is very subjective. I don't say it's always subjective, but it's very difficult to have an objective opinion from those people. But still, you can have them. But the most reliable sample size is from the students, where there's not much interaction between the students. So this sample size lacks sufficient information to be useful. So you see, these are the difficulties in doing real pedagogical statistical research in this field. So in the absence of such research activities, in studying the correlation between research and teaching, most people rely on their perception. And as I said, perception of people like us is that there is a correlation, it is positive. In fact, it is supported by some of the American and British studies also, that this correlation is positive in science and engineering and in the postgraduate colleges. It is significant and positive in science and engineering and postgraduate. It is small, it is positive, but very small in case of postgraduate education in humanities and social sciences. In undergraduate courses, it is found that the correlation is almost there is no correlation. But that is more reflection of lack of information rather than the reality, as I said, because the teachers students do not know about the other activities of the teachers, and that is because teachers don't talk about it. So one of my suggestions is that you can do a little exercise in your institution, your own institution, to start with in your department. In your department, there will be people who will be active in research. In your college, in your university, there will be people who will be active in research and teaching their classes. You can do your own survey and find out these correlations. This will go a long way in understanding the correlation between research and teaching. So I have tried to present to you the status of interconnectivity of research and teaching. Unfortunately, as I said, in India, also everywhere else, more emphasis is given to the research component of the teachers, even though there is no incentive given to research, no extra incentive given to research activities by the institutions in almost all subjects. Even in the absence of any substantive support, the emphasis is put on research component, which you all might have faced in your own interviews. So many questions are asked. In fact, even more appointments are also based mostly on your research achievements during your student days or during promotions in your active teaching days. Whether the institution provides any facility to you or not for research, but they expect you to do a lot of research. So this is lopsided. The fact that you are a very good teacher, you are appreciated by the students, no matter what were the criteria. Still, in every institutions, there are some people who are supposed to be acknowledged as very good teachers, but no credit is given to them when it comes to the promotion or to other activities, other than the appreciation by the students. So I think a quantitative and objective assessment separately of teaching and research is really required for assessing the academic achievements of teachers in in all the institutions. I think with this much presentation, I have sort of taken all your time, and I'll stop here. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer that. If you have any comments to make, I would like to hear your comments. And thank you very much for your patience for last hour and a half during my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your nice deliberation. Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask. If you have any doubts with the...
Thank you, sir.
अशोक तलवार सर कुछ कहना चाह रहे हैं आप?
Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Karma ma'am.
Thank you so much for your long deliberative research and teaching. So, as I pointed out, you mentioned that the situation is quite lopsided, wherein we are expected to do research, but we are not given any leave or incentive. There was a recent case also, especially, and I want to highlight on the point wherein, especially mothers or women faculties face much more of a problem. There was a recent case wherein assistant professor from Himachal Pradesh had to move to Supreme Court just to get childcare leave. So the problems are already there, and moreover, it's more additional problem to women and mothers. So, sir, in such a scenario, can we expect like some policy changes wherein it could be much more, positive and encouraging for us to pursue? Personally, for me, I had joined research, but soon I was to become a mother, so I had to quit my research because I could not give my full time for the research, and it's quite a challenging task. So I choose motherhood over research. And even when like my daughter is still young, it's very difficult for me to just fulfill my responsibility as a teacher. On top of that, I have to do my research as well. And there are no policies which favors like us mothers. So what is your opinion? And can we expect any policy changes wherein it would become much more favorable for us?
You see, I think your point is very well raised. In fact, as I said, that in our Indian situation, I think there is not even realization of the problem. Forget about the policy changes or thinking of doing any policy changes. As I said, these days the concept of good teaching doesn't really exist in our university system at all, because every evaluation, right from appointment to promotion, is done on the basis of the research component only. So, I mean, this realization is lacking, and
So,
this is lacking because this is lacking.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So, if I may just add on what you were saying, I have many colleagues of mine who actually are pursuing PhD so that they can get promotion, not because they want to become a better teacher.
Yeah, but I said, how do you determine a better teacher? I mean, that is also, unless, you already know in your promotion or in your appointments, there's something point count. No, a lot of the points are counted. Now, there's no point for good teaching. No, I mean, there's no criteria, there's no parameters to define a good teacher. I think as far as teaching is concerned, all as long as you're taking your classes, unless there is some report against somebody by the head of department or the principal, unless there is an adverse entry, every teacher is supposed to be equally good. There is no grading on the basis of teaching, as there is a grading based on the papers and the quality of papers and things like that. So teaching is not, evaluated. Teachers are not evaluated in our system for many, many years. In fact, we have been advocating. We were advocating when we are in active service. But again, the question is, what are the parameters to determine a good teacher? I mean, so that's a difficult thing to do. So, but I think still something can be done. But I think there is no will to do it in our country. As I said, there are commissions appointed in US and UK and Australia to study this problem. But to my knowledge, the problem has not been studied in our country. It needs some study before some policy decisions can be suggested or taken at the level of the government. Okay.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Harris from Aligarh Muslim University, Malappuram Center. Sir, first of all, thank you for your very informative lecture. Sir, I want to know that the creative writing, like novel, poem, poetry, and short stories, these types of writing has any academic calculation benefit? Is it calculating or counting for academic for scores or anything, like ISBN books or articles or anything? Because these days creation is the highest form of cognition. Even Bloom's also taxonomy says. So in these types of creative writing, how it is counting in an academic scenario?
No, but the creative writing is counted in humanities and languages. I think that is counted.
Yes, sir. How it is like research journals? It is one poetry or one short story or one novel. These types of writings also counting as a journal or like that for academic scores.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, sir.
Yes, this is counted as a paper. I think it's humanities and languages. It is counted.
Participants, any more questions? Because we have another session at 5:30.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your nice deliberation. Thanks again for on behalf of HRDC AMU Aligarh.
Thank you very much, Aftab sir.
Participant joins with the new link for next session.
Okay, sir. Thank